Hi, I'm David Ricci. I'm a fine art photographer and lifelong resident of the Berkshires, and I'm thrilled to be back here on Solar Creatives of the Berkshires for the third time, actually. The first time I was here, which was episode number 2, I talked about my first photo book, which is called Edge, which is published in 2022 by Fall Line Press in Atlanta, Georgia. And then my last time I was here, which was episode number 50, I talked about my current project, Hunter-Gatherer, where I've been photographing at antique fairs, antique malls, and flea markets throughout the United States. I've shot it over 24 states and 200 venues. And towards the end of that episode, I talked about putting together what we call a book dummy, a prototype of a book to shop around to publishers. And at the end, I said, well, maybe I can come back a third time if I find a publisher for my book. And lo and behold, I do have a publisher for my book, which will come out in November of this year. MW Editions in New York City is planning to publish the book. So I'm back here now to talk about the process of putting this book together. Because in the last episode, I talked about a number of the struggles that I had in putting together my prototype and in editing and designing this book. And I wasn't able to do that on my own. I really needed a good photo editor and a good designer. And I believe I've found that in MW Editions. So what I want to do here is go through the current PDF of the book. And this is, I'd say, 95% done. This is not quite the final version, but it's very, very close to it. And I want to talk a bit about what goes on when putting together a photo book, because it's a little different than putting on an exhibition in a gallery or a museum. So what you see on the screen right now is the open book. It's going to be a hardcover book, 10.5 inches high by 9.5 inches wide. So what you're looking at is the first open page of the book. And this is what's called the end sheet. So the left-hand side is glued down to the inside cover of the hardcover book, and the right-hand side is glued down to the first page of the book. And this is our first title page, and then we come to the second title page, which is where you can see the subtitle we came up with, Salvaged Stories of American Culture. And on the left is what's called the frontispiece, and we agreed that this is a good choice to introduce the book, because as I mentioned in the last episode, and probably not all of you have seen that episode, but I talked about a number of the concerns I had, and the difficulty of putting the book together was because there's a lot of different themes and issues that I'm addressing in this book. So I'm photographing these objects that were made. Well, this is where the essay will be dropped in. That is not the essay. Cheryl Finley is a well-known art curator, critic, and author, and she's providing her essay this week, we hope. And I'll talk a little bit more about her at the end. But I'm shooting these objects and these scenes that I'm finding at the antique fairs and flea markets. I'm photographing them just as I find them, okay, without rearranging everything. And initially, my focus was on consumerism and materialism and all the stuff that we buy. But it kind of veered down different directions as the project evolved over time. I started addressing issues that relate to gender roles, how men and women were represented in these objects that were built and designed years ago and that are being resold now in these marketplaces. Another avenue I went down addressed race. Another one addressed pop culture. So all these different things are going on in my mind as I traveled around the country taking these photographs. And in putting the book together and putting together my prototype, I struggled with how am I going to weave in all these different themes and all this different subject matter. And I also had a number of different approaches to making the photographs. Some of them are very complex compositionally, and some of them are much simpler. Some of them are light and airy, I guess you could say, and some are a little more dark and somber. So I struggled in getting it all together. But what we're looking at here is the actual current edit and sequence of the book. And again, it's not quite completely done, but it's very close to that. So there's a lot of consideration that we had when working with the editor and publisher, Amy and Robin, and selecting not just the images, but the size of the image on the page, what will be on the opposite page, and what the sequence and flow is, and to gradually introduce the different themes and topics and ideas in the book. And I think we've successfully done that. Again, thanks to their expertise and experience on editing and sequencing the book. So a number of these photographs I did show in the last episode that I did for Solo Creatives. And if you happen to have watched that, you'll notice that some of those are in the book, but some of the ones I showed did not make it into the book. So my process was, when I put together my book dummy, is I made hundreds of little 4x6 inch prints and spread them out on a table, and came up with an edit. And then I revised it, came up with another one, and I went through several of these copies of these one-off copies that were printed by Blurb. All right, you can just get a single hardcover copy to shop around to publishers. When I started working with the publisher who's going to publish the book, MW Editions, I sent them 450 images. I sent them the 4x6 prints and digital images, and then they came up with their own edit, which was significantly different than the last one that I had worked on, but it was very similar to one of my earlier edits. In any case, over time, we worked together and put together a final edit of, I think, 92 photographs that'll be in the book. It'll be 160 pages long with 92 images. So Michael makes an appearance here. There's a number of objects or things or items that sort of appear and reappear, which is another part of the weaving process of developing the book. So Marilyn Monroe kind of makes a number of appearances. She flows in and out. Clowns come in and out. What else? The American flag makes a number of appearances. So this shot here was up in New Hampshire at an antique shop. And again, I'm shooting it just as I find it, as I find the objects displayed. And this, in my mind, speaks to, the way, feminine versus masculine, the way women are represented, the way men are represented. This is out in Colorado. John Wayne, one of the great icons of, American masculinity, or at least thought to be. This is out in Fort Worth, Texas. And this photograph, I think I spoke about this the last time, but this is, this speaks to a number of different things. This was shot at the Brimfield Antique Fair in central Massachusetts, which I've shot at, I think, 20 times, because it occurs 3 times a year. And this, if you look at the upper part of the photograph, the way I read this picture is, the white women in the background in the posters are, smiling and thin and happy, and they buy cars and they fly airplanes. In the middle section, you see the tropes or the stereotypes of people of African descent. So that's a very common figure, the mammy figure, which is was used throughout the 20th century, actually in late 19th century. So these figurines that were produced and manufactured decades ago are now being resold. But the mammy figure is, more rotund, and the black figurines are more in service. They're maids and butlers, right? And they're lined up like bottles of Coke. And then in the foreground, there's even more happening. The image on the left says, "No swimming allowed," with the S crossed off, so no women allowed. And then the center one, it says, "Wild Man of Borneo," and there's a black child inside the cage. So there's an awful lot of things that are going on in this particular photograph, but it covers a number of the themes that you see throughout the book. So again, you're looking at the open book here, and a lot of the images bleed to the edges. In other words, there's no white border around them. So on this one, it's bled to the left-hand side, the top and the bottom. We've done that with a lot of the photographs in the book. In one of the earlier designs at MW Editions, we had white borders all around. Robin, the designer, then decided to try this out, and we all really liked it. Another factor, of course, is the composition and the color. This has just happened to be an odd juxtaposition. I positioned my camera to get the clown in the background on the poster, all right, overlooking the figure on the can of coffee. But I also noticed that the color palette was very similar in both objects. This image on the left was taken in Cleveland, Tennessee. The title is "The Bluest Eye," which is a reference to Toni Morrison's first novel called "The Bluest Eye." And I gave a talk a few days ago, actually, where somebody asked me if, I think that all these photographs I've taken, these juxtapositions of these objects, were they intended by the dealer? And I think in some cases they were, in some cases they weren't, but it's not all that important. In this one, I don't think the dealer gave a lot of thought to the fact that the black figure, the lawn jockey in the background, has blue eyes, and the one in the foreground has blue eyes. But most black people don't have blue eyes. So the reference to Toni Morrison is there's one of the characters in the in the novel who wishes that she could be more white, okay, or be more accepted, which means being more white, maybe have blonde hair and blue eyes. Anyway, I was struck by the fact that they both had blue eyes. Andrew Cuomo and John Kennedy. I don't know if it's Andrew wishing he could be John Kennedy or Andrew thinking he is a lot like John Kennedy. And this figure here, this was taken in Farmington, New York. And in this one, I believe, the dealers probably intended this to be funny and humorous, in which I thought it was as well when I took the photograph. But you can think about it in different levels, too. The influence of pop culture on Christianity or religion, the interface between religion and popular culture in the United States. The one on the left was taken in Rhode Island, I believe. Yes, West Warwick, Rhode Island, and the one on the right was in Dublin, Georgia. Again, these are just taken as found. I don't know if the dealer's intent was to make the play off of the picture of Christ in the nice normal family or not. The one on the right, apparently Mary's hands had fallen off and somebody had placed them in front of her. This was taken in North Carolina. These are large plastic forms taken at an antique mall somewhere in North Carolina. So one of the other concerns I had when I was putting together my book dummy was how to, not just what to include and what not to include and how to weave in the different themes, but maybe it made sense to group them into categories, which is what I did on my website. So I could have a category for the male versus female that I call the male gaze or the male/female gaze, one on religious iconography, one on race. But then I realized that it was sort of telling the viewer how to look at the photograph, and I didn't want to do that. So, for example, the one on the left here, topless, which was taken at Brimfield, is it about religion? Is it about objectification? Is it about a combination between the two? Is it about how male figures or female figures are represented? There's a lot of things to think about and consider. So when we came to our edit here at MW Editions, we decided to make one long string of photographs without any breaks with text or categories or titles. So on the right, now this is the first time I think we see the Sambo figure, which is very derogatory, which is true of a lot of the black memorabilia. And I just trying to make it clear to people that my purpose here isn't to promote these types of images and figures. It's to just kind of illuminate it, that these objects were made decades ago, and people bought and sold them. And they're being bought and resold now in America. And people collect them. And I found in doing my research on this that there are even prominent African Americans who have collections of black memorabilia. Henry Louis Gates Jr. actually has a large collection of black memorabilia. And there's actually a museum in Michigan that called the Jim Crow Museum of Racist Memorabilia, which was started by and is run by Dr. David Pilgrim, an African-American professor at the university out there. And his idea is that we don't want to push these things under the rug. It is part of American history. It needs to be looked at and thought about and determined that, we should never be making things like this again that are derogatory. So this photograph was actually taken last year at Brimfield, and I was struck by these degrading figures of people of African descent in the foreground with the great American flag behind it. Then I noticed there was a stain on the flag on the right-hand side. That last vertical white stripe has a stain on it. Stain on America is the reference. This is called Stars, Stripes, and Stereotypes, again at Brimfield. So when I spoke about this work the last time, I'd shown a number of images of doll heads that I had photographed and mannequin heads close up, which are very different than a lot of the other photographs that are in the body of work. And we try to figure out how to incorporate them into the book, and I'm going to show you now how we ended up. I wasn't even sure if I would be able to keep them in the book. I'm going to go back a page here. So that was the one in Brimfield, and then if I go forward, so on the left we have another black memorabilia picture, but we only have two figures. We got Donald and Mammy, right? The previous one, we had a group of figures, then on the right, we have a single figure, and then we flow into a single image, or an image of a single doll close up. And then what we did is put together, excuse me, a grid of 18 images, 9 on the left-hand page and 9 on the right-hand page. And then to work our way out of that grid, we have another picture with 3 dolls. And this is kind of, the mammy of the future, if you will, the black doll holding the 2 white dolls on her lap. And then it continues on with other references to race. And again, the Christianity is a huge aspect of American culture for a very long time, as race and race relations. And so we flow from this, the Christian iconography on the left into the black Jesus, white Jesus on the right. So it's all combined together, right? So again, the Christianity and how it ties in with objectification. I was struck on this one by the fact that, of course, Christ has the loincloth on, and the female figure is using a fan as her version of a, quote, loincloth. This was shot in Pendergrass, Georgia, at a really massive indoor flea market. It runs on weekends there. And these are just propped up against the table just as they were. I didn't move them around. But again, this one speaks to a number of different things: consumerism, money, popular culture, Christianity. There's our friend Elvis again with Marilyn on the left. And another appearance of the American flag. The flags are showing up again here. So it was a very complex process of editing, sequence, and designing this book. Some photography books fall together a little more easily than others. I think my first book, Edge, was easier to edit and sequence. This one was much more complex, again, due to the wide range of themes and issues and types of photographs and subject matter. And so this one was one of the more shocking things I came across, which was also at Brimfield. It's a carved out of wood of a Native American woman with her hands tied behind her back and blindfolded, and I noticed a chain hanging down alongside her. So I stopped and made a photograph of that. And the one on the left here, I think I shot out in California. Yeah, that was in Los Angeles. The one on the right, the black and white figure, is the famous photographer Dwayne Michaels, who did a lot with sequencing. He made sequences of photographs. That's one of his things he's really known for. But here he is surrounded by all these scantily clad female figures. So this is called Out of Sequence. And this one here, I've taken so many pictures, I don't remember where I took them all. This was in Chamblee, Georgia. Now, one change that happened going from my dummy into the final edition of the book is these types of photographs I had had in an earlier edition of my prototype, and I had taken them out, and then the editors at MW and I talked about bringing them back in because I thought it made sense because of they're very interesting, complex compositions. And so you look at it more in terms of their structure and their formal elements rather than any type of social commentary. And their point to me was, every image doesn't have to hit you over the head and make some type of, strong social statement. And they got me to agree with that. I think it makes sense. So I'm glad we added some of these photographs back in. The one on the left is from Colorado. The right is another Brimfield shot. This is also out in Colorado. This is one of the earlier pieces. Just, amazing display of checkerboards. This is in Havre de Grace, Maryland. Different lunch boxes and all the different, cartoon characters and other pop culture figures that were, we all carried in our lunches in going to school. This was taken in a antique fair in upstate New York, in Bulkville, called The Gathering. One of the more bizarre collections of black memorabilia that I came across. And this one was one of the more shocking pieces. It's hard to read at first when you first look at it to see what's going on in this picture. But these are little metal figurines. And I'm shooting straight down, I'm looking straight down into a crate. Okay, and that grayish material is bubble wrap. And these figures are lying on top of the bubble wrap. And if you look at them carefully, you see there are alligators biting at the legs of the black child or black figures. And the bubble wrap sort of read to me as being like water, like they're floating in water. And this references what's called alligator bait, which was an idea around the late 19th, early 20th century that black babies were being used as alligator bait. Now, most historians think that it's not really true. There are some people who think it was true. But anyway, somebody went and made these figurines referencing the alligator bait, and this dealer had a whole collection of them, and they were in a crate. You had to actually look around all the different crates to see this thing. Anyway, again, not trying to promote or advance any type of racist ideology. I'm trying to just illuminate what has been done in the past and how it reflects what's going on today in America. The one on the left is Alpha Overload that I took in Virginia Beach, Virginia. This one is called The Last Order. The one on the right was taken at the Rhode Island Antique Mall in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Just again, an odd juxtaposition of objects. The syringes on the tray with Jesus Christ on the cross looking over them. And I happened to notice that the box in the background said the National Casket Company, so I positioned myself to capture that. So the ironies abound in that photograph. This is over in Hudson, New York. The one on the left is in Los Angeles. The one on the right is in Lee, Massachusetts, where I live, at the Retro Pop Shop. And then we move to a mannequin headshot, and then we did another grid of mannequins. It made sense to do the grids twice. So again, there's 18 mannequins, and then we work our way out of that and come to the end of the series. And this is not done. This is one of the parts that's not done yet. At the end of the book, we'll have several thumbnails. We'll have thumbnails of every image in the book, and it'll include the date, the title, and the location of the shot. And then there's a few more pages of acknowledgments, and then it's the last image, and then that's the closing end sheet. And let's see if I can. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, we didn't really design the cover till we knew what was going to be in the book. So Robin Brunel, the designer, eventually came up with a number of options. So I thought it'd be good to show you a number of the options that we had and how we ended up. So he came up with this one with these very bold hunter-gatherer letters in gold above and below, and we tried different photographs in the middle. That one. And then he tried overlaying it, and this started to make more sense to us. But this particular one, I looked a little busy, but this is how we ended up. So this is going to be the cover of Hunter-Gatherer when it's published in November in New York. But the Hunter-Gatherer letters and my name will be foil. It'll be laid out on top of the photograph, so it'll be sort of raised up a bit, if you will. That's Cheryl Finley, who's going to be writing the text that we're, again, expecting this week. She's a very well-known author, critic, and curator. She's the publisher, or the author, I should say, of Committed to Memory, the book on the right-hand side there, The Art of the Slave Ship Icon, which was very well received and won a major award. And these are just mock-ups of the book. It's not printed yet. This is just what it will look like when it is printed. And I will be running a Kickstarter campaign to help fund the book. And you can find that by going to Kickstarter.com and doing a search on my name, where you can make pledges to help support the publication. If you're watching this during August, of 2025 or early September 2025, the Kickstarter will be going on. After that, there will be, you can find my book at my website, davidricci.net, or at the publisher, mweditions.com, or at your local bookstore or online at any of the major providers of books, such as Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Walmart, Target, any of those folks there. Anyway, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And I want to thank Sherry Steiner again for having me on for the third time here on Solo Creatives of the Berkshires. And I want to thank the folks at CTSB for recording this whole thing for us. Thank you. Bye.